I didn't read a book for fun for over a decade. Like many of us, I read a ton in elementary school, but once I started getting books as assignments in high school and then college, the whole idea of reading became a chore. When I could be watching movies or playing video games with my small amount of free time. And then everything changed when I discovered Star Wars books. For the first time since childhood, I was reading for the fun of it, because I loved this universe, because I loved these characters, and that was all I really needed. And then last year, one of my best friends gave me Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and everything changed. I'm Eric, and welcome to Utini. Hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't, because today we're going to see how Brandon Sanderson changed my reading life forever, and why he is the perfect next read for Star Wars fans. When we first grow up, reading is a gift. When you first learn how to read by yourself, you realize that the thrill of discovering new worlds is now at your fingertips whenever you want it, and it becomes the best thing in the entire world. And when I was a kid, I embraced this to the absolute fullest. I went to the library, I counted down the days until the book fair, I read series after series after series, my imagination practically screaming with excitement the entire time. And then something shifted. The older I got, the more that reading started to become a bit of a chore. And despite good intentions, a lot of it came down to changes at school. What began as silent reading time that encouraged me to read whatever I wanted became assigned classics that I didn't quite enjoy as much. Books were no longer gateways to new worlds, they were homework assignments with worksheets and quizzes that never left the back of my mind as I tried to identify with the characters. And as the years went by, this attitude towards reading soured even more, and I began to view books as obstacles to things that I actually loved, like movies, sports, and video games. I simply didn't see books as a reward anymore, and I felt myself almost falling out of practice with the idea of reading for fun. Then I found Star Wars books. Back in 2018, my best friend lent me a copy of Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, and to this day, I'm still not sure why I took a chance on it, but I did. And almost immediately, that childlike sense of wonder came rushing back. I devoured this book, and I still think it's one of the best Star Wars books ever written. And afterwards, I went on to Bloodline, Leia Princess of Alderaan, and more until I had firmly established myself as a Star Wars reader. I loved it. But there was still something missing, because despite my newly awakened love of Star Wars books, I wasn't breaching out into any other genres or worlds. There was definitely an excitement to reading books set in a universe I already knew about, but there was also a safety blanket that I was reluctant to release. Could I take time to learn about another galaxy? Would I have the patience to take in new exposition and characters? Or would that move teleport me back to the assignment fatigue of high school? Well, luckily, those fears were put to rest when one of my other best friends, the lovely and talented Charles Hankel, lent me Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and everything changed once more. I fell in love with Sanderson's writing, his world, and I started spreading the gospel of Brando Sando to everyone I could. And much to my surprise, he was a hit with nearly everyone I spoke to, especially Star Wars fans. Which leads to our ultimate question today. Why? What is it about Brandon Sanderson's writing that not only enticed me to start reading fantasy and any other genre as voraciously as possible, but also seems to be a perfect bridge for Star Wars readers to fall in love with reading as a whole? Well, as far as I can tell, Sanderson ensnares Star Wars fans because of his mastery of mythology, his use of classic yet complex characters, and something that all of us have loved for decades, a continuously expanding universe. When George Lucas first created Star Wars, he was very clear that one of his goals was to create a modern mythology. Built on the shoulders of Joseph Campbell's philosophies on the topic, Lucas's Galaxy built a framework for an extraordinary mythos that has been fleshed out for over 40 years. Think about it. We know so much about the Star Wars universe, from planet names to histories of entire civilizations, functionalities about how the mystical force does and doesn't work. And now, anytime that a new Star Wars project comes out, we can expect a new addition to that mythology, as well as inspiration from all that has come before. And if you thought you loved that interwoven complexity with Star Wars, Brandon Sanderson will blow your mind. Every world that Sanderson creates within his mythology is a world that he knows top to bottom. Whether it's the history of different cultures, the magic systems that populate the world, or even the growth patterns of the fauna, every single piece of every single planet has been thought out to the fullest. And each new entry in his body of work expands upon that knowledge. Take the Mistborn series, for example, one of Sanderson's most famous works and the best place to start, if you ask me. This takes place on the planet Scadrial, one of the many planets in Sanderson's universe named the Cosmere, and the first line of the first novel is simply, "Ash fell from the sky," which immediately lights up your mind with so many questions. Why is ash falling from the sky? Is this a normal event? Has there been a fire? Am I being plunged directly into chaos? It's like the Tantive immediately being attacked at the beginning of A New Hope. Both Lucas and Sanderson have no fear of setting up events that plunge the viewer or reader directly into the action, because they know everything that surrounds it. And sure, Lucas uses crawls and Sanderson occasionally uses prologues, but both creators know that their fans are ready to jump right into the midst of a living, breathing world, because we trust that both men know exactly how those worlds operate. And this level of trust is another somewhat intangible part of world building that I think attracts Star Wars fans to Sanderson. Over the years, Star Wars has taught us to accept machinations of the Force, or revelations in plot or character development, because we trust that the story will reward us in the end. And that takes a long time. There's a reason that I stuck to Star Wars books for so many years. It's because that trust is hard to build. But Sanderson does such a wonderful job establishing that sense of trust early on by imparting the sense that he always knows exactly where he's going next. Because the worlds and magic systems are so airtight, you never have to wonder if a plot point will be resolved or if there's a reason that something is happening. Because yes, it will be, and yes, there is. Period. Being able to trust an author because of their complete control of their own mythology is such a gift, and it makes Sanderson's worlds the second best part of his entire body of work. The first, of course, being his characters. One of the best ways a creator can entice you into loving their work is by introducing characters that you simply can't ignore. Star Wars does this better than most by exploiting a measure that is easy to use, yet difficult to master: trope. Because when you think about it, the characters that started it all back in the 70s really are just near perfect executions of classic tropes. We have the simple farm boy who yearns to have an adventure, the princess that rises to rebel against the system that has surrounded her, and the scoundrel with the heart of gold. Character tropes that were seen for years and years before, but Lucas's expert treatment of Luke, Han, and Leia allowed them to be classic and complex. And that same method has been used all the way through Rey, Finn, and Poe. And here's where we bring it back to Brando Sando. Because as we said, yes, his magic systems, unparalleled. And his action scenes are, dear God, they're sensational. But his characters are the reason that he's become such a legend of fantasy. And it's because Sanderson employs this very same technique, but on an even more massive scale. Let's take two of the best examples: Vin from Mistborn and Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. Vin was the first protagonist that I ever met in Sanderson's work, and her trope is one of my favorites since childhood. The down-on-her-luck street rat that finds a gang through which she finds her purpose. A classic tale, but Sanderson executes it perfectly. Because even though Vin starts off being quite separate from the larger workings of the world, Sanderson uses her as our eyes into the very fabric of Scadrial. Through Vin's evolution, we learn about the power dynamics of the world, the political structures, the wonder and practical uses of magic, and we see her understand everything from friendship to first love to the weavings of the fabric of the universe. Just as Luke learns the Force, Vin learns the magic of metals. And you can't help but be enraptured. And then there's possibly my favorite character in all of fiction, Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. For many Sanderson fans, Kaladin exemplifies the peak of Brandon's mastery of character creation. The consummate soldier who experiences betrayal and must rise from the ashes, Kaladin challenges the classic trope of picking yourself up by your bootstraps by adding in elements of prejudice, morality, and perhaps most importantly, mental health. Kaladin's struggles with depression are some of the most relatable and earnest in fiction. So much so that Sanderson has been lauded time and time again for his amazing representation of its effects. And this is perhaps the final reason that Star Wars fans can relate to Sanderson's characters so intimately. Because after all, one of the best parts about Star Wars is that every fan belongs in a galaxy far, far away. Whatever your gender, race, sexuality, disability, or creed, you can be found within Star Wars. And that fact has always allowed our fandom to blossom with wonderful people from all over the world. Now, historically, the fantasy genre has not always been fantastic about this type of representation, but Sanderson's worlds are just as rich as ours. And most importantly, He wants to ensure that he writes every character with respect and honesty, so he uses a very specific tool. Before any Sanderson project is released, Brandon employs an exhaustive list of beta readers. Some of these readers are used to ensure clarity of plot or synchronicity with the rest of his universe, but others ensure that Sanderson, a straight white guy, is writing characters who are different than him in a way that accurately reflects their experiences, so that every single one of his readers can feel authentically seen within his work. Because the importance of a young girl seeing Rey grab a lightsaber in The Force Awakens is just as key as a fan in a wheelchair realizing that they're the star of Dawn Shard. After all, it's easy to jump into a universe where you know you exist, especially when those worlds are always expanding. When you compare Star Wars to other fictional universes, it can be easy to think that everything else feels a bit small. I mean, you're telling me there's just one trilogy? Or everything takes place on a single planet? I mean, that's fine, that's digestible. There's nothing wrong with that. But what if I want more? Enter the Cosmere. The Cosmere is the official name for Brandon Sanderson's connected universe that spans multiple books, multiple planets, multiple eras, and even multiple planes of existence, and it's all combined into one mythology. Now, I won't pretend to be the absolute authority on the Cosmere, and if you're interested in knowing more about how the Cosmere was formed and how to understand it in depth, I'll link those in the description down below, including a video from the man himself. But what I will tell you is this. The Cosmere is essentially the manifestation of the one semi-impossible thing Star Wars fans have asked about for years. A single, interconnected universe where there really are many jumping on points. Because within all of the books inside Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, there are definitely Easter eggs and connections to be found, but you can also legitimately read all of the series independently from each other and not feel lost. And honestly, that shouldn't work, but it does. Because there's a single mind with a single vision at play. And if you know anything about Sanderson's process, you know that he has planned the entire thing out. And we're talking years and years and years down the line. Because when you're creating something of this scale and complexity, that type of planning is the only way that you're able to expand so massively while ensuring quality and excitement for your readers. And this is where the Cosmere really scratches that expanded universe itch that Star Wars fans have had for years within our own community. Where Star Wars books thrive because we get to have stories about Jedi and stories about smugglers on different planets and in different eras like the High Republic, Sanderson's methodical planning allows him to tell all different kinds of stories within his own realm while ensuring that his larger mythology stays consistent. But what if you are reading everything? Well, that, as Anakin would say, is where the fun begins. Like with Star Wars, if you're caught up on every part of the larger story, you get to experience the highs of seeing references from other stories or planets as they pop up in your current books. Like when the Barash Vow came up in The Acolyte. Sure, that's cool by itself, and you weren't totally lost if you hadn't heard of it before. But if you had checked out Charles Soule's Darth Vader comics, you got to lose your mind a little bit. The Cosmere has that exact same feeling as references from Mistborn, Stormlight, Elantris, Warbreaker, and more find their ways into different narratives. And it's something I never imagined could exist to that level apart from a galaxy far, far away. Now that being said, Sanderson's universe does have one major difference from Star Wars, and that is the simple fact that there is already a planned ending. Although it will be completed decades from now, according to Brandon's plans, he lives every day knowing the ending of the Cosmere. And if you're like me and have felt like, at times, it can feel like Star Wars isn't 1000% positive on where it's heading, this thought is encouraging beyond belief. Now, all of that being said, I still really love Star Wars books. As I said earlier, they were single-handedly responsible for making me read anything after such a long break, and some of my favorite moments in the history of Star Wars have happened on the page instead of the screen. But I can't deny Brandon Sanderson's work may have changed my life even more because he made me fall back in love with reading as a whole. So if you're finding that you seem to have finished all the Star Wars books that exist, or you simply want a break to change up this part of your daily routine, I can't recommend anyone more than Sanderson. I mean, hey, he even has a channel in our Discord all about his work because of how many readers in our community have specifically flocked to his books off of their love for Star Wars. I mean, there's really a magic connection between these fandoms, and accepting that fact has been revolutionary. And finally, if you're looking for the best place to start your Sanderson journey, well, luckily, he has some thoughts on the matter himself, and I'll link to his video on recommendations down below. But for my money, you can't go wrong with starting with Mistborn, The Final Empire. Or, if you want to stand alone, Tress of the Emerald Sea. And if you found any of this helpful, or you just love celebrating one of the best fandoms in existence, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if this was worth your time. And until next time, may the Force be with you.